The party was in full swing, and loud laughter never seemed to quiet down even for a moment. The young people were joking and fooling around, trying to come up with all kinds of funny dares. Hanging out in the nightclub, the young people felt right at home, as they had been there many times before. Ethan Price was one of the regulars, as he came to the club almost every night. The bartender recognized him and always made an effort to serve him first. Being from a wealthy family, Ethan could afford to have a lavish night out, and everyone who knew him personally had no doubt about it. Ethan also loved all sorts of bets and dares, so he challenged anyone willing to risk their money as well as their reputation. That day, he bet his friend Derek that he would get a date with the first woman that would enter the club at that moment. Surprisingly, Ethan didn't care about the way that person would look. The bet was about the social group the contender would belong to. Being overly confident, Ethan hoped that some young woman from a wealthy family would walk into the nightclub. People following the bet froze and turned their gaze towards the entrance. Imagine Ethan's disappointment when an unkempt woman entered the nightclub. She simply made a mistake and was looking for a different place. Casting an embarrassed look around the room, the homeless woman hurried towards the exit, eager to leave such a noisy place. The appearance of the homeless woman in the midst of the party caused another explosion of laughter. But Ethan wasn't laughing anymore. Now he had to go on a date with that homeless woman, otherwise he would lose the bet. Derek looked at his friend and smiled. "So, are you ready to make a romantic rendezvous with that beggar? I'm warning you up front, there's no turning back. Otherwise, you'll have to admit defeat." Ethan's cheeks flushed. "Are you doubting me? You can be sure that I'll do my part. Moreover, I'll provide photo evidence to prove it." Derek just shook his head. To be honest, he didn't believe that his friend would go to such extremes. He'd known Ethan since childhood, his rich parents securing him a comfortable life, thereby proving their financial and social standing as one of the city's elite. Derek's parents were equally as well off, which was one of the reasons behind the young man's ongoing competition for the status of the best and the coolest. If Ethan's father bought him a new car, Derek would immediately ask his parents to get him a car with even better specifications so he could outdo his friend. This age-old rivalry brought them a lot of trouble, but neither of them wanted to back down, continuing to prove their exceptionalism and strength of character to each other. Of course, Ethan wasn't thrilled about going on a date with some poor homeless woman. On the other hand, no one was forcing his hand, but since he did accept the bet, he needed to see it through. Being in a slightly agitated state, Ethan left the party earlier than he usually would. The thought of having to walk down the street hand in hand with a beggar woman in just a few hours consumed his mind. Trying to find a way out of the situation, Ethan came to a clear plan of action. He decided that he wanted to invite the homeless woman on a date, and he needed to become homeless himself. Well, to pretend, that is, for the sake of winning the bet. Why not? I'll put on some old rags, approach her, and strike up a conversation. Who knows, maybe I'll even manage to pick up some street beauty in the meantime, Ethan thought with a hint of irony. The conditions of the bet didn't include any specific details of how he had to achieve his goal, so Ethan decided to take advantage of this loophole. The trick with dressing down had several advantages that simply couldn't be ignored. First and foremost, if Ethan were to dress as a homeless person, none of his friends would recognize him. Moreover, the homeless community would see him as one of their own and would even feel more comfortable around him. So that's it. That's what I'll do. Now all I need to do is find some suitable clothing and get started, Ethan thought with a smile. The next morning, he had a quick breakfast and headed to the garage to start working on his transformation from a wealthy young man to a homeless beggar. Finding the right clothes wasn't difficult. Ethan made use of the clothes left behind by the janitor who quit his job a month ago. A faded linen shirt, jeans with patches on the knees, and old sneakers that looked like they could fall apart at any moment. Not even his own mother would have recognized Ethan in such an attire. Having applied a little makeup to his face, the young man felt like a spy going undercover on a very important mission. Ethan had a rough idea of where the homeless community gathered, so he headed there without wasting any time. His intuition didn't fail him. The homeless people had gathered near a half-ruined building that used to be a canteen. They set up something like a temporary shelter there. Of course, if law enforcement officers were to raid this place, the homeless community would have to search for a new place again. Deep down, Ethan felt sorry for the people who were deprived of homes and roofs over their heads. In essence, they were unfortunate individuals who ended up on the street at the whim of cruel fate. Having approached a small group of homeless people, Ethan immediately tried to gain their trust in order to acclimate himself and establish connections as quickly as possible. To his immense surprise, they turned out to be very welcoming people. Having welcomed Ethan into their ranks, they promptly offered him a slightly hardened bun, which, despite its appearance, turned out to be quite edible. Then the rich man in disguise saw the woman who he was supposed to charm. She was about 40 years, or even perhaps older. It was hard to be precise since she didn't have any makeup on and her hair was a mess. Homeless people often resemble each other, like twin siblings. Life on the streets doesn't really help the skin stay young, so a 20-year-old homeless person could easily pass for a 40-year-old, and a 40-year-old could even seem like an elderly person. Wind, sun, rain, and snow. All of these leave their marks on the appearance of homeless people deprived of basic necessities. Since the woman seemed rather friendly, Ethan decided to initiate the conversation. "Hello, how are you? Would you like to take a walk in the park? Or maybe we could go grab a hamburger." The stranger looked at Ethan with surprise, but she didn't refuse. She clearly took a liking to the young man, which didn't go unnoticed by the other members of the group. However, Ethan wasn't particularly interested in the opinions of the other homeless people, as all he wanted to do was win the bet and prove his superiority over Derek yet again. As he would learn a bit later, his new friend's name was Gloria. She didn't talk about herself much, and Ethan wasn't particularly curious either. Having gotten a hamburger for himself and his companion, Ethan sat on a bench and started enjoying the aromatic treat. After the long walk, Ethan found himself ravenously hungry, something that didn't really happen to him before. Eating outdoors seemed extraordinary and almost intoxicating to him. His companion shared the same opinion and turned out to be surprisingly pleasant to have a conversation with. Chatting with Gloria about everything in the world, Ethan realized that he was wrong about her age. She was at least 10 years younger, perhaps even 15. Ethan came to this conclusion by analyzing his companion's way of speaking. Inadvertently, Ethan felt an unexplainable surge of sympathy for Gloria, who was just as engaging in conversation as the woman he was used to spending time with. Yet, he remained mindful of the bet he had made and couldn't afford to lose. "Listen, how would you feel about renting a cheap motel room to have a little rest and take a shower? Don't get me wrong, but I'm so exhausted and sore from all the walking," Ethan suggested cautiously. Ethan wasn't lying. His body was aching from the unusual strain, and his calves hurt from the long walk. "You're so strange, living on the street and already tired by noon? Although, you're right, I wouldn't mind taking a shower right now," Gloria replied with a smile. Ethan was over the moon. On the one hand, he was on the verge of winning the bet, and on the other, he could finally relax and recuperate. The only concern on Ethan's mind was Gloria. He still hadn't figured out how he would explain his forced masquerade to her. "Alright, I'll come up with something. Maybe it'll work itself out. The main thing is, we'll spend the night at the motel together. That should be enough to win the bet," Ethan thought, trying to justify himself in his own eyes. The poor man had no idea what kind of surprise was waiting for him at the motel. Gloria was the first one to take a shower, but she started hesitating in front of the bathroom door. Then she looked at Ethan and grabbed a gray strand of hair. "What is she doing?" raced through Ethan's mind. But what Gloria did next completely shocked him. Having grabbed her own hair, she abruptly removed her wig. At the sight of Gloria's raven black hair, Ethan exclaimed in astonishment. "What's going on? Why all the dress up?" "I'm sorry, I had to do it. It has nothing to do with you," Gloria stammered and disappeared into the bathroom. Ethan sat in a chair, his head in his hands. He thought he was the only one playing a role, pursuing his personal goals. Meanwhile, Gloria had fooled him too, but why? What was the point of all this? Fortunately, Gloria's secret had nothing to do with Ethan's bet, and that became clear as soon as she emerged from the bathroom. The first thing that caught Ethan's eye was her skin. It looked tan, and together with the curly mass of hair on her head, easily gave away her foreign origins. "I used the makeup to make me look more American. I was actually born and raised in the Philippines, but after my late parents' house was destroyed by a typhoon, I moved to the US. "Wow, I never would have guessed by looking at you," Ethan exclaimed. Meanwhile, Gloria continued. "When I arrived in Iowa, the first thing I tried to do was find a job, but that turned out to be very hard. No one wants to hire a woman from another country. Then I ended up in an organization run by some criminals." Ethan tensed up visibly. He felt that Gloria was getting to the most important part of her story. They deceived their workers, making them work for free. I got outraged, but nothing good came of it. As a punishment, they took away my documents and work visa. "So I ran away and started wearing disguises and wigs to avoid being found," the woman explained. Only then did Ethan understand what the unfortunate woman had to go through, having fallen victim to scammers. "You know what? Don't worry about it. We'll get your documents restored. I'll ask my father. He's a businessman, but he also knows the city's prosecutor personally. We'll corner those scoundrels, I promise." Ethan hurried to reassure the young woman. Now it was time for Gloria to be surprised. "Your father is a businessman? So have you also been playing dress-up? But why?" Ethan nodded awkwardly and looked down. A minute later, he was sharing his own story with Gloria, which turned out to be no less interesting than her own. Soon they were both laughing their hearts out, amazed by the unexpected, delightful encounter. Ethan won the bet, but in addition to the satisfaction of beating his rival, he got a very pleasant bonus in the form of getting to know Gloria, who turned out to be very sweet. Ethan kept his promise and asked his father to help Gloria restore her documents. The gang exploiting the free labor of illegal immigrants was arrested, and its leaders faced significant prison sentences. To Ethan's surprise, Gloria decided not to return to the Philippines, but to stay in the US. Rumor had it that she had a very compelling reason for that, and that reason's name was most likely Ethan Price.